Hello and welcome to News Centre. I am Ashmit Kumar. Now, India's Internet and Mobile Association has moved the Supreme Court against the government's new self-declaration portal for digital advertisements and for advertisements as a whole. They have said that the government's mandate could have severe impact on the ad ecosystem. This move comes a day after the government's self-certification portal went live following a Supreme Court order. The advertisers have slammed this move as a one-size-fits-all approach and claim that the rules for television are being force-fitted onto the digital ecosystem. The self-declaration portal was launched by the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting for advertisers to upload self-declarations against misleading advertisements. Now this, after the Supreme Court, while hearing the Patanjali case, has expressed concern about misleading advertisements duping customers. The Apex Court had directed on May 7th that no ad will be published across all mediums without the advertisers submitting an undertaking against misleading ads in the form of this self-declaration on the government portal. Now, following the court's direction, the government issued guidelines and an advisory for the portal that went live yesterday. And well, joining us now to discuss this further, we have with us Aparajita Bharti, co-founder of the Quantum Hub, and Stella Joseph, partner at the Economic Laws Practice. Thank you so much for joining us, Ms. Bharti. Let me come to you now. The broad message that the government, as well as, more importantly, the Apex Court is putting out is that, look, we just don't want misleading advertisements. There needs to be some accountability. And as a part of that, at least on the face of it, this looks quite innocent, this mechanism, that advertisers are required to give an undertaking before they put out the ad that, look, there is no misleading content in our advertisement. The industry, however, has used words such as compliance burden, hampering growth, force-fitted onto the digital ecosystem, that this will come as a shock to the ecosystem. I just want to get an understanding from you as to why the industry is concerned about this portal for self-declaration.
Thanks, Ashmit, and you're absolutely right. I think the intention here is clear that there should not be any misleading advertisements. But I think just the way in which the court has directed the government to implement this intention is something which is very problematic when it comes to ease of doing business. Now, imagine as a citizen, if you have to wake up every day and say that, hey, I'm not a criminal, right? Instead of somebody flagging you that, you have done something wrong and therefore the law should apply to you. This is how we are actually thinking of when we are looking at self-declaration certificate by each and every advertiser. Every business, no matter what size, what scale, even if it is a one-person business, for example, my mom is a home chef. If a lady runs a coaching center, even if you run a one-person shop, you do advertising in some form. And in fact, digital advertising is one of the cheapest ways to do it. So force-fitting rules that apply to broadcast media to digital advertising is something which doesn't make sense a lot from an operational point of view, because operationally they are very different. The volume and the frequency of such ads is also very different.
Sure. It's a very interesting point that you make in terms of the impact that this will have on startups, on smaller businesses. We'll come to that and we'll address that point in just a bit. Let me go across to Ms. Joseph. Ms. Joseph, thank you so much for joining us. The first question to you, that as far as the Supreme Court's May 7th order, where it said that, look, we want a portal where all advertisers will be required to undertake that there is no misleading content in our advertisement, that is grounded in Rule 7 of the Cable TV Network Rules. Now, these rules have been in effect for a better part of the last 20, 30 years. The question that I want to ask is that why is there now a concern being expressed by advertisers at this point? Shouldn't they have been comfortable with this mechanism going forward that, look, there is already a rule in place for the last 30 years?
Sure. Thanks, Ashmit, for having me. So, while you're right that the rule existed for a very long time, but the manner in which the Supreme Court has actually mandated this self-declaration is something that is absolutely new. This mechanism was not envisaged in the Rule 7 that existed as on date. And this entire concept of self-declaration is something that has never been in place. The Rule 7 simply lays down that advertisements need to comply with certain guidelines, they need to be not obscene, compliant with normal moral codes and ethics, etc. But it does not have a mechanism of self-declaration, which has now been introduced. So that is where the challenge lies, and that is where everybody is up in arms in terms of having this self-declaration mechanism being enforced in this rigorous manner.
Let me then ask a supplementary question, and this is a concern that was also echoed by the IAMAI, which is that as far as the cable TV rules are concerned, that applies to broadcast, whatever framework is required for broadcast advertisers should be independent of the framework for advertisements on digital ecosystem, that these are completely different platforms. The word used by the IAMAI is that cable TV rules are being force-fitted onto the digital ecosystem. Is that your assessment as well? Because the IAMAI seems to believe that we already have the IT Act, we already have the IT rules that govern the digital ecosystem. Why now comply with the cable TV rules?
Yeah, so, let me take a step back and just introduce that in terms of advertisements and regulations governing advertising in India, they are, spread across under and covered under many legislations. So you're right that print, media and digital media is governed by a separate set of rules, and TV and cable is governed by a separate set of rules. And, the concern is valid, but unfortunately, how the self-declaration mechanism is now put in place is that it basically requires you to comply. Requires you to declare that you are complying with Rule 7 as well as other relevant regulations applicable to advertisements, and that is spread across multiple legislations, including the Consumer Protection Act. Including the misleading guidelines on misleading advertisement regulations of 2022, and so therefore it's not very correct to say that we will not be guided per se in terms of that, because see, in essence, if you compare Rule 7 and what is covered in Rule 7 with what is covered in other regulations such as guidelines on misleading advertisements, which apply to everyone, the content is quite comparable.
Sure. Right, Ms. Joseph. Let me take that question across then to Ms. Bharti as well. Ms. Bharti, you were referring to practical difficulties with the implementation of this mechanism. You mentioned smaller businesses. Help me understand the scenario. If I have a small biryani restaurant and I'm putting out advertisements on Google for advertising my biryani, my product, will I also then be required? Will small businesses like me also then be required to put out these disclaimers and undertakings and declarations before this MIB portal?
Absolutely, Ashmit. I think at this point, no distinction has been made whether what kind of business, what scale of business. And I think, obviously, when it comes to small businesses, the more layers of compliance you add, it requires, it's more cost to them, it's more time to them. Also, another thing to keep in mind, and I just want to add to the last question as well, under the IT Act, under Section 79, already there is, a provision that if something is flagged to digital platforms, which is misleading, which causes any kind of harm, they have to take down. So we already do have a mechanism that when something is flagged, it can be taken down. And we have moved to a self-declaration mechanism. Sure. In which case the efficacy is also not clear. For example, if everybody was to also comply with this and upload all the self-declaration mechanisms, it is not clear how it will help MIB actually in making sure that the self-declaration is actually correct. Right? So how will they actually go through? And if you see, the portal has been live, and I think today morning when I checked, about 7,000 people have already uploaded self-declaration certificates or downloaded. But who is going to actually look through them and make sure that, it's actually solving that purpose? So I think if a nudge has to be given to advertisers that whatever they are uploading, should not be misleading, there are easier ways to do it. through changes in UI, UX, and I think already so many platforms require you to do a check mark that you meet the community guidelines, there is nothing vulgar, etc., in your advertisements. But doing this and then also adding another layer on the top of it where the publishing platforms
Sure,
have
Ms.
to
Bharti.
ensure the authenticity of
Fair
the
enough. So an increase in compliance burden.
Yeah.
Right, Ms. Bharti, I just want to take a cue from one of the aspects that you had pointed out in terms of if the idea is to combat misleading advertisements, does MIB have the bandwidth to be able to look at so many submissions and so many declarations? Just to bring in a number, there were over 30 crore advertisements that were put out in the digital space. Assuming that there is one declaration filed for every advertisement, will the MIB effectively be able to monitor or review these declarations?
I think it's very difficult.
Ms. Bharti, that's for you.
Okay. I think it's very difficult. The intent of the court is, I think, to give a nudge. It's almost like a self-check before you put out an advertisement. I still think that, we will still have to go back to CCPA, the provisions under Consumer Protection Act and under 2022 misleading ads guidelines where advertisements where misinformation or misleading claims are made, they are flagged and some action is taken against them. I don't think self-declaration certificates itself would lead to, more truer ads. It may just increase compliance.
Fair enough. We're running out of time, so I'll just come across to Ms. Joseph for one final question. That as far as the way forward is concerned, the MIB has its hands a bit tied because the Supreme Court order very clearly says that this is a direction that needs to be followed. It needs to be treated as a law. So is this the way forward? That will all advertisers and industry associations now be required to move the apex court? IAMAI has taken the first leap.
As of now, yes, we'll have to kind of progress towards that. Of course, the case before Supreme Court is at an interim stage. So the next date of hearing is on 9th July. And therefore, there might be ability for, associations or institutions to kind of seek clarifications on how this can be implemented in their specific facts. Is it disproportionate? Can some leeway be given? Or otherwise make representation to the government and MIB specifically to kind of give certain exceptions or may reduce the periodicity or in somehow give some relaxation. That might be the way forward.
Sure. Ms. Bharti, same question to you on the way forward. When these industry bodies, they move the apex court, what is a formula, a more workable formula that they can present before the apex court? If not a declaration for every advertisement, is it possible then to perhaps look at a declaration once in a year or once in a certain given period of time? That, I understand, was one of the submissions that the ISA had made.
I think, Ashmit, that sounds more feasible. And I think within that also, there might be some exemptions for very small businesses. Because I think also there is no one, there's no way that MIB can, MIB doesn't know the number of advertisers in this country. I don't think there is a single database to, in fact, make sure that everybody's sort of doing that. So maybe there are so many unregistered businesses, there are so many one-person businesses. So I think also having an exemption for these, kind of requirements, even if it's an annual requirement, I think that might also be necessary. And I think the court will probably, when they see the scale that we are talking about and the complexity of digital advertising, I am pretty confident that they will see why this is a little bit unfeasible.
Well, the industry will surely be holding its breath. The hearing, we understand, will be next month, in the month of July, when the Apex Court is due to take up this matter once again. Again, just to reiterate, IAMAI, the industry body for digital service providers, has taken the leap, has moved and knocked on the doors of the Apex Court. The other industry bodies are contemplating similar action. I'd like to thank both of our panelists, Ms. Bharti, Ms. Joseph, for joining us with their perspective. But with that, it's time now for heading into a very short break. Up next, a Deloitte survey highlights that India Inc.'s positive perception about the GST regime is on the rise. My colleague Timsy Jaipuria joins us with two special guests